Happy Saturday evening, everybody. This is a live severe weather briefing as we have Tropical Depression 28 that has formed in the Western Caribbean to the south of Cuba. This is the same storm that we were watching for many days in a row with the GFS model, showing that broad area of low pressure forming in the Western Caribbean, generating at least one or two tropical cyclones. But we've got Tropical Depression 28 that has formed, soon to become Tropical Storm Zeta on approach to the northern Yucatan. And it looks like it's taking a very similar track to Delta once again, and the other hurricanes that we've chased so far. I can certainly see it coming into the Yucatan Peninsula. And one thing I'm noticing here on satellite is that there definitely is a burst closer to the low-level center. So there was a little bit of a disconnect between this mid-level convective blob earlier that was off to the west of the center up there, and the low-level center off to the southeast. And we actually had the low-level center further east than that, according to Hurricane Hunter aircraft. But based on satellite, you could definitely see that this thing had a closed circulation, which is one of the defining factors for a tropical depression. The winds near the center are incredibly weak at about 25 knots, so not very strong in terms of the winds. Pressure, though, is down to 1,005 millibars, and I think we're going to see a convective explosion likely tonight. And you can already start to see the beginnings of it here a little closer to the low-level center. The low-level center seems to be heading in this direction, drifting toward the convection, and eventually when they become vertically stacked, that's when there's a chance of more rapid intensification, and it could impact the northern Yucatan on Monday evening. So we're definitely watching that very closely to see if we have to make a last-second trip down to the Yucatan to intercept this again and go for the double intercept. Right now, the official forecast track has a strengthening Tropical Storm Zeta, becoming a hurricane in the southern Gulf of Mexico, but passing just to the north of the Cancun area. Cancun's right here on the northeastern tip, and I would love to go check on my rental car as well, the Chrysler 300. I would really like to check on that. We actually had to drive all the way to the Merida area, which is over somewhere in the northwestern Yucatan, maybe even a little bit further than that. There is a north-south road that goes up to Progreso there. But we had to bring that rental car all the way to Merida to fly up to the U.S. to get the Louisiana landfall of Hurricane Delta. And there is no record of the rental car being returned, which is a little bit worrisome. I'm probably going to end up owning that rental car when it's all said and done, in which case I'll have to go back and retrieve it. But I wouldn't be surprised if this forecast track is a little bit further south again. One theme that I've been noticing this year is that anticyclone across the northern Gulf of Mexico has been incredibly robust. And similar to Sally, when we had that record-breaking early season snow event in Colorado, that was a cutoff low that dove off to the south, but a very stagnant upper-level pattern developed, and that allowed for the Bermuda High to expand off to the west across the southeastern U.S. in the northern Gulf of Mexico. And that's forcing these tracks to be a little bit further west, and to trend west with time as the models are underestimating the strength of that high pressure that is going to extend across the northern Gulf of Mexico. But really, look at this convective explosion that we're watching unfold right before our eyes here. And looks like that min pressure was down to 1,005 millibars. The hurricane reconnaissance aircraft positioned the tropical depression underneath that convective blob. But based on visible satellite, it certainly looked like this low-level center was a little bit southeast of that. And now you can see this convective blob propagating toward the low-level center. And I believe that Tropical Depression 28 is somewhere in this vicinity right now. But as is often the case with these tropical systems, during the night, you have convective explosions. During the day, you have a bit more of a minimum in convection. A lot of that is related to the water temperature being much warmer than the overlying atmosphere in a relative sense compared to the day. But usually you see these convective explosions like this with tropical systems overnight. That's why you often get strengthening that will happen. The National Hurricane Center believes that because of the disconnect and that the convection is a little bit displaced from the low-level center, that should delay intensification as it's approaching the Yucatan. And there's also going to be some land interaction. But you can see this very large gyre out here with some high pressure aloft as well. So you can see the clouds moving in this direction. That's the anticyclone aloft. And then at the low levels, you get a cyclone that forms, the low and mid levels. And when that convection gets coupled with that low-level center, we're likely going to see some more rapid intensification. And the Hurricane Center has a low confidence forecast right now of Zeta reaching Category 1 hurricane strength in the southern Gulf of Mexico. But there is a lot of cooler water temperatures around the north central Gulf of Mexico up here. That should cause Zeta to weaken on approach, but even if it is a strong tropical storm, there's likely going to be life-threatening storm surge across portions of the central Gulf Coast. Still easily could maintain a hurricane strength on approach, similar to what Delta did, where there was that cold water right along the immediate shoreline. But really, it's definitely a system to watch, and there are a couple different scenarios for where this system tracks. A couple of the forecast model members take it further east across the warmer waters of the eastern Gulf of Mexico and that loop current where you have warmer water in the southeastern Gulf. That could put at risk the western coast of Florida. So you still got to keep an eye on this thing all the way down to Naples. In fact, all the way down to South Florida. But right now, most of the models are taking the second scenario, which has a stronger high pressure building in across the northern Gulf of Mexico, bends the system off to the west. And then the trough, the same trough that's going to bring potentially 12 to 24 inches of snow here across the Colorado Front Range and adjacent foothills. Several inches of snow down in the Denver area as well. That system's going to cut off, bring a blizzard for portions of the northern Texas Panhandle and the Oklahoma Panhandle, and then that same trough is going to cause a northeastern turn of Zeta, take it into the central Gulf Coast. And there's a chance that this trough could be potent enough where it could bring severe weather across Dixie Alley as well, while it's recurving this tropical system off to the north into the central Gulf Coast. And definitely need to keep an eye on this from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, the west coast of Florida, because that's just what you do when these tropical cyclones enter the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of times they end up strengthening, going crazy once they reach the warm waters of the Gulf. The saving grace is that it is late in the year, and we've had a lot of tropical cyclones in the northern Gulf of Mexico that has led to upwelling and some cooler water temperatures along the shelf there, the shallower water of the northern Gulf of Mexico. So that at least will cause Zeta to weaken a bit, and there's approaching trough from the west, which should gradually increase the shear too. As we get a turn to the northeast, you'll probably see a half a cane type of a situation once again. The models like the HMON and a couple of the other members maintain hurricane strength as it approaches the north central Gulf of Mexico, but most of the models have it weakening to tropical storm strength. Looking at the intensity forecast, the official National Hurricane Center intensity forecast is in the text, and you can see that they intensified into a very minimal hurricane as it passes by the Yucatan Peninsula, but there's a lot of uncertainty in this forecast in it reaching minimal hurricane strength. As it's passing the northern Yucatan, it'll be interacting with land as well, which can act to disrupt the tropical cyclone, but oftentimes when these tropical cyclones move across the rainforest there, flat rainforest of the northern Yucatan, they really maintain their strength as they pass by, and I wouldn't be surprised if this does intensify a little bit earlier. Based on satellite, it looks like that low-level center and the convection is beginning to couple, and if that happens, then it's definitely going to intensify much more rapidly and could be a hurricane even by the time it arrives in Cancun, and we are considering a Cancun intercept, of course, in which case we'd probably have to leave tomorrow evening, maybe an early Monday morning type of an intercept as well, could be in the cards. But here are the hurricane models, and definitely take these with a grain of salt as well. But they do seem to be trending upward, with a couple of those members showing hurricane strength, including the official Hurricane Center forecast that does have it up to a minimal hurricane. But most of those members, you can see, maintain this system as a tropical storm. And a lot of that is because of the cooler water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico for this time of year. Also, the arrival of wind shear with an approaching trough from the west that's going to potentially lead to a blizzard across portions of the southern high plains. But most of the official guidance does take it up to a minimal hurricane briefly before weakening down to landfall here between 96 and 120 hours as it approaches the central Gulf Coast. Most of those models are showing a weakening of Zeta down to tropical storm strength. But you know how it goes with the Gulf of Mexico. These intensity forecasts often underdo the strengthening of these storms, but that's usually during peak season as well, when you really get those extreme warm water temperatures. And with the Gulf of Mexico overall anomalously warm, even with that cooling across the northern shelf, it's still borderline to be able to maintain a tropical cyclone with those temperatures in the far north central Gulf of Mexico in the upper 70s. I'll show you a map of those water temperatures though a little bit later. And these intensity models, the hurricane models, and global models, and really satellite imagery for visualizing these storms, all available at the incredible website tropicaltidbits.com from Levi Cohen there. But I really want to go through now the GFS model. We got to give the GFS model credit because it has basically nailed the development of this hurricane since the beginning. So we'll use that to kind of assess the upper level pattern. Right now, though, incredibly weak surface flow, or weak steering pattern down here in the Western Caribbean. Overall, you've got a weak cyclonic gyre in the Western Caribbean. The last cold frontal passages had northerlies that dove down through Central America into the Bay of Tehuantepec. And then you get those southeasterly winds to the east of that eventually spins up a broad area of low pressure. Some clusters of convection will develop in there. Those clusters can release latent heat as well. And then once they get consolidated over a surface low pressure, and you start to get that closed rotation, which was evident on satellite, and that minimum in pressure was also measured by the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. But here is the upper system that's off California. That's going to be swung through the southwestern U.S., across the southern plains, cut off and develop a blizzard across the northern Texas Panhandle and Oklahoma Panhandle. And as this trough swings through, it's going to pick up Zeta as it's north of the Yucatan Peninsula and turn it to the northeast up toward the central Gulf Coast. Here you can also see Epsilon that's transitioning into an extratropical system. That's just southeast of Labrador over the warm waters of the Gulf Stream, lifting northeast, coupling with the polar front jet stream, interacting with those temperature gradients, losing its tropical characteristics. Wind field is expanding as it's lifting off to the northeast. Basically, not dissimilar from the bowling ball that's off the coast of California, except that it does have more tropical characteristics, a little bit of a warm core there, a sting jet whipping around the southern side of it as well. But this little cluster here of vorticity is Tropical Depression Zeta, and that's just to the northeast of Honduras, due south of Cuba. We were just analyzing it on satellite, and now I'm going to step forward on the GFS model here. This is the 18Z GFS. Look at this beautiful coupling of that cutoff system off California and this really potent, intensifying upper-level storm system coming in a northwest flow. Not dissimilar from the system that we saw in early September, too, that came in with this northwest flow. You've got this big ridge with the anomalously warm waters as well over the northeastern Pacific, definitely contributing to that, with the intermodulation between the polar front jet and the sea surface temperatures here at the mid-latitudes, kind of doing a push-pull type of an action on that. But really, since ocean temperatures evolve much more slowly than the overlying atmosphere, even in the extratropics, I believe that they'll encourage a wave train, and in this case, with those warm waters in the northeastern Pacific, encouraging a further west orientation of this monster ridge in the northeastern Pacific, bringing a lot of warm air up into Alaska once again, as is happening a lot these days. And then you get systems coming in, diving southeast in the northwest flow, and exciting these pattern shifts that we're seeing. And in this case, when this system cuts off over the southern high plains, it'll bring a blizzard, and when it gets swept across Dixie Alley, there is a pretty decent chance of severe weather. And look at this system with a positive tilt. That means it's still intensifying. A ton of flow loaded on the backside. Really, the operational GFS doesn't do much with Zeta, even though it does have a decent environment down here. Weak steering flow, minimal wind shear. There's still a chance I could see Zeta intensifying rapidly on approach to Cancun. There's a lot of warm water down here. That warm water extends all the way up toward the Florida Keys, the southwest coast of Florida, the loop current of the Gulf of Mexico there. So this is the forecast for Monday evening. And look at this system diving down into the Four Corners region and closing off down there. Really, that cutoff system that is off the shore of California loses its identity. It's just a little jet streak whipping around the southeastern part of this low. And the main low that's coming down through the northern Rockies closes off over the Four Corners. And you may remember from early September, when an upper-level storm system closes off in the Four Corners, that's perfect for upslope snowfall and a perfect position for Lee cyclogenesis and big-time easterly upslope flow. Denver, Wyoming, even northeastern New Mexico, going to get hammered from this. You're going to have the combination of jet dynamics, vorticity advection until this thing closes off. and then a prolonged period of upslope snow that could bring 12 to 24 inches over portions of the Colorado Front Range and the foothills. Much needed precipitation with the wildfires still burning so out of control. And this system actually closes off to the south of the Four Corners region. And the European model especially has been picking up on this mega blizzard across the southern high plains, the northern Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle, southwestern Kansas in the early part of next week. But still, it looks like on Tuesday morning, the GFS just has a pretty diffuse Zeta somewhere near the northern coast of the Yucatan up there. And look at this high building west across the northern Gulf of Mexico. So there's a chance that the Tropical Depression 28 that could become Tropical Storm Zeta migrates a little further west even than the current models are showing, and that would take it over more of the northern Yucatan before it really gets organized, which could act to completely lose its identity completely. And then when this bowling ball ejects across Dixie Alley, if there is anything left of Zeta, it'll take it up off to the northeast. It'll start feeling that southwesterly wind shear and could weaken it more. So really we have to decide whether to chase Zeta or chase the blizzard portion of the storm across the southern high plains. And then as this ejects across Dixie Alley, chase that system with the Dixie Alley tornado outbreak happening at the end of next week. This is Tuesday evening when this system cuts off, still getting prolonged upslope across the foothills of New Mexico up to Colorado. A mega high pressure is also going to form in this inflection zone between the ridge and the trough to the east. And that's going to create intense offshore flow across California. That's going to fan those wildfires in the northern Sacramento Valley, central and northern Sierras, up through even Redding, Chico. All those areas have extreme fire danger that's going to develop when this high pressure initiates through early next week. So there's going to be big problems with fires up there across the west coast. But look at this monster system in the southern plains. So Zeta basically weakens in this operational GFS run in the 18Z, but if it was there, it would start to turn to the northeast here by Tuesday night. You can see this system ejecting, and there's a lot of uncertainty with the ejection of these bowling ball-like systems like this across the southern U.S. The timing is always a little bit uncertain, so it could come out a little bit slower, which would allow Zeta to propagate further west and maybe impact Louisiana. But it sure looks like the steering current is due north here with the anticyclone building to the west off the southeastern U.S., cutoff low moving across the southern plains, steering flow turning to the north, eventually to the northeast. This could definitely bring severe weather as early as Wednesday over portions of Dixie Alley. Look at this bowling ball of a system right there. It's much more significant comparatively than Zeta, but it looks like severe weather Wednesday evening and Thursday across Dixie Alley. Seems very reasonable. Look at that system. Let's look at the low-level jet here in this GFS run also. And there's that low-level jet across Dixie Alley, and a lot of flow on the backside. So this is definitely going to be a cold side loaded system. Blizzard, snow coming in through the southern plains, and then possibly Dixie Alley severe weather. This is on Thursday, so the timing of this system likely needs to slow down a little bit to be a more substantial severe weather threat. Thursday evening though, potential tornado outbreak across the Carolinas, Carolina Piedmont, up to even portions of the mid-Atlantic here with this evolution of this trough. Looks like another one, possibly this system here across western Canada. Could be another one that comes down as we get into early November, hopefully breaking down this ridge that many of the models were forecasting through early November to develop across the western U.S. But this could be something to watch. Quite an incredible evolution of this system. Let's get a little bit closer. This is the Pivotal Weather website. Incredible website for model visualization. Look at this thing. Jeez. So that's Wednesday night. Woo! That is nasty, but you're probably talking about a blizzard there in the Texas Panhandle. 998 surface low, basically vertically stacked. A lot of cold air aloft with a bowling ball system like this. So the western periphery of this precip shield, even into northwestern Oklahoma, even southwestern Kansas, northern Texas Panhandle, could certainly get some big time snow on Wednesday. And just for fun, let's see what these models are showing. Oh wow, look at that. So the GFS is definitely on board with quite a blizzard here across the southern plains. Up to 2 feet of snow across the Oklahoma Panhandle, Texas Panhandle into southwestern Kansas. A lot of snow in the Colorado foothills, Colorado Front Range. Definitely going to help out with those fires. The Mullen Fire up in this area. Cameron Peak just south of that. Big time snow too for the southern mountains. San Juan's, Sangre de Cristo is there, and northern New Mexico. And then the upslope begins with that bowling ball ejecting from the four corners across the southern plains. Now that's an incredible snow map. That's the 18Z GFS. Hope you guys are satisfied down there. And that definitely begins Monday, Tuesday, just snow cranking out there. See what the NAM shows. The NAM is less bullish on that signal of upslope to the southeast, but the GFS and the European are definitely on board. I love the NAM forecast snowfall for north central Colorado. Some 40-inch areas up there. And that's over the Cameron Peak Fire, Mullen Fire, East Troublesome Fire out there. That's much needed snowfall that will so help out with the wildfire situation. If not, completely get rid of those. But the NAM definitely has a Colorado loaded system. Look at this. That is nasty. Not as much in the southern plains. And that's because the NAM is a bit slower. Cuts it off, just spins through Tuesday night out here. More slow ejection. So there is a chance that the NAM is going to pick up on greater snowfall across the Texas Panhandle and Oklahoma Panhandles later than this. But it is a slower trough ejection. And this just goes to show you the uncertainty with a pattern like this. With the GFS a little bit faster with this cutoff low. The NAM's a little bit slower. Let's see what the European shows. And the European is kind of a halfway point between the two models. Either way though, this bowling ball has to eject at some point, and it's going to lead to a stripe of very heavy snow and likely some blizzard conditions. Decent pressure gradient even with a perfectly circular cutoff low like this. Big surface low as well, causing those surface pressure gradients, whereas the northwest side of that system is just going to be ripping there. Wow, look at this. So the European model just has a little fluff of a tropical storm making landfall in the central Gulf Coast and then basically energizing this warm sector. So there's probably going to be a big tornado event across Dixie Alley if any bit of a tropical cyclone is able to survive this and enhance the wind shear while you're getting those southwesterly winds aloft, increasing the deep layer shear, causing supercells in the outer bands. So who knows what this is going to do. It's possible Zeta could just die out over the northern Yucatan with a further west track, because there is a big high pressure that expands over the northern Gulf of Mexico. It's like Thursday is going to be a big severe weather day across Dixie if you believe the European model. Look at that. Big severe weather event, Dixie Alley. Even though the low-level jet isn't quite organized with this weird cutoff system, you need more of an open wave to get those mega low-level jets across Dixie Alley. But still, I see this being a severe weather event. It looks like the European model lifts Zeta through the warm sector toward the mid-Atlantic, and it kind of disrupts the low-level jet that would happen with a system. So if Zeta does develop, there's a chance that it could prevent a tornado outbreak from happening across Dixie Alley. Actually would probably bring a tornado threat with it all the way up to the mid-Atlantic, clear out the warm sector a bit in its wake. And there goes the remnants of Zeta, basically a little low-level jet pop off the mid-Atlantic into the western Atlantic Ocean. So quite an interesting pattern moving forward. Here's Zeta. Let's revisit that convective explosion here. I'm going to switch back. And it's Tropical Depression 28 officially right now, but you can really see that convective explosion there closer to the center of Zeta as it's becoming more coupled. The low-level center is becoming merged with this convection. And then you get the positive feedbacks. The latent heat release with the updrafts contributes to further pressure falls, more convergence at the low levels, more rapid updraft, more intense latent heat release. And those positive feedbacks are what generate these mega heat engines that are tropical cyclones across our planet. And they're so important in transporting heat aloft in the atmosphere and to the poles. And again, the NHC forecast track here. There you can see the official track, weakening it to tropical storm on approach to Louisiana. But there's a lot of uncertainty with this forecast. The GFS had the formation of this tropical cyclone for several model runs, lost it for a few runs. Everybody said it wasn't going to happen, and then it suddenly happened. So the GFS has been on this since the beginning. We're going to stick with that model through the duration of this storm. And looks like the NHC is similar to the GFS runs as well, the global models. GFS and European are in surprising agreement with this system. And now let's take a look at the wildfires. We'll use radar as a tool because there's a lot of cloud cover that's moving in right now over top these fires. And I suspect that cloud cover played a role in the lack of those pyrocumulonimbus plumes developing today, like they did a couple days ago. Lapse rates in the mid and upper parts of the troposphere were incredibly steep. So, and the winds were also strong. Relative humidity was incredibly low as well. And I think that contributed to plume-driven fires, unprecedented fires over Colorado, with those two fires getting close to 200,000 acres. But one thing you can see here, and we'll look at the echotops, when those plumes were going crazy, you could really see them on echotops. And it does look like, and you gotta loop it, see if, I believe that this is a flare-up of the Williams Fork fire up here to the north of Vail. But there's also been some reports of precipitation up here in Kremling in these areas, so some of this virga is reaching the ground. This looks like a flare-up of the East Troublesome fire a bit, a couple hot spots that might be forming. It's also possible, though, that these are showers, and the virga is falling, and the cloud cover is continuing up here. There's satellite imagery, too, you can use to identify these hot spots from happening. But I believe that this is the area that's been burning just to the east side of the divide, and most of that has been grass burns that hasn't been catching up on the trees. That's what we've been hearing on the scanner, at least. Local storm chaser here in Colorado has been watching it like a hawk. And it did get about 3 miles southwest of Estes Park at the closest. And but most of that was burning in the grassy areas. Thankfully, didn't catch the tops of the trees, and really didn't become a rapidly expanding fire with that big-time pyrocumulus cloud. And I wonder if that's because of the early arrival of cloud cover, higher relative humidities in the upper levels of the troposphere, a little bit of a reduction of those lapse rates above, and that slight increase in humidity and decrease in temperatures may have been enough to not make those fires explode today. But still, that red flag fire alert continues until 7 p.m. Many mandatory evacuations around this area, including Estes Park. Earlier, I was told by the PIO that to let everybody know and to emphasize that they don't have any information yet on which structures were able to survive, but as soon as they know that information, they'll be delivering it to people. But we do know that there were many structures that were destroyed on the west and northern side of the Grand Lake area out there. I did hear that the Grand Lake Lob survived, so at least that is pretty good news. And this snowfall is going to arrive this evening. You can start to see it up here in the echotops in southeastern Wyoming, northern Colorado. And this is gradually going to expand south. I bet these are showers, virga showers down here. They just don't quite have the look of those intense pyrocumulus. Maybe some hot spots with the East Troublesome fire there. But these are the winter storm warnings that have been issued. Winter weather advisories to the east of it, but Denver is included in that winter storm warning. Let's see what the official is in Denver. 6 to 12 inches. And that winter storm warning is from 6 a.m. Sunday until 6 a.m. Monday. Not seeing any blizzard warnings yet out here, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of these areas west of Cheyenne, where that wind really funnels to the north of Elk Mountain. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these areas are upgraded to a blizzard warning. But I think the foothills we could see as much as 2 feet up here. And I'm going to be documenting this winter storm, of course, streaming live. And the winter storm warnings cover the western slope as well out here. 8 to 14 inches, locally higher amounts in the southern San Juans. But the European, the GFS, some of those are showing up to 3 feet of snow across the northern, the Rockies, the higher elevations there in north central Colorado, and the mountains there of southern Colorado. So, and they're going to add more alerts further south as well, as they've done from north to south. So I'm definitely going to monitor this very closely. Let's look see how the snow looks right now in Wyoming portion. Yeah, it's definitely starting to break out to the northwest, to the north and to the northwest of Cheyenne, up in the Torrington area, areas where we chase so much in the way of hail producing supercells. Is just to the southeast of Wheatland, starting to see some snow break out. Probably some moderate snow near Chugwater happening right now, and these bands will gradually fill in. Well over a foot is going to happen out here, maybe more than that as well. I know that AccuWeather is sending Jonathan Petramala down into the Cheyenne area as well to cover the storm. I'll be covering it for you guys down here in the Colorado foothills. And it does look like that's precipitation that is happening. It's probably virga still over the fires, but I do think in the next few hours that's going to start reaching the ground. And then that'll be really good news for the wildfire situation. I'm going to pull up the surface map now. So the temperatures are definitely cooling. Winds are still pretty gusty right now. I'll pull up that surface map. So there you can see Colorado, Wyoming. These northerlies, this is actually the Arctic front up here. That's where that snow is breaking out to the southeast of Wheatland. Temperatures plummet into the teens up there in Casper, 18 over 13. Northerly winds gusting up to 30. Still ahead of that front, Cheyenne to Laramie. Temperature is still in the 40s, but they're about to plummet with the arrival of that Arctic front. And then temperatures over these wildfires. They're cooler, and the dew points, some of the dew points are in the 20s, teens to 20s. You do have a pretty low dew point further south there. But for the most part, slightly higher relative humidity has been enough here over the Colorado Rockies to prevent those fires from blowing up today, despite those very gusty winds ahead of this cold front. But still, that red flag warning extends through 7 p.m. So we got to keep a close eye on that. But the Arctic front's on the way, snowfall's on the way, and that's going to provide much needed relief for those wildfire zones. So thank you guys so much for joining my weather briefing today. Please consider joining our supporter group, making these live briefings possible, live storm chasing possible, and our field science, like the Surgeonator that will deploy inside Tropical Cyclone Zeta if it does happen. But for the most part, the models are pretty relaxed with the probability of rapid intensification. Most of that's because the northern half of the Gulf of Mexico is a little bit cooler. The arrival of that upper system from the west is going to increase the wind shear and the interaction with land as this system approaches the Yucatan. But it looks like it's going to become vertically stacked tonight and could intensify a little bit more rapidly on approach to the Yucatan. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's hurricane strength when it comes near Cancun on Monday late afternoon or evening. So I'm going to continue these live briefings with all this weather chaos, and I'll be live at sunrise tomorrow when that snow breaks out across northern and eastern Colorado, and I'll cover it through the whole duration, keep you updated on the tropical system, and the threat for the Southern Plains blizzard, the threat for Dixie Alley severe weather at the end of next week, and the prospects for intercept of Tropical Cyclone Zeta. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your Saturday evening.